Greetings, folks. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to this Catalyst new moon forecast. We have today, the 21st of October, a Libra new moon. And, this is going to be quick and dirty. And that's part of why I just have this image of an AI generated footbridge with some scales in the background. This is actually the thumbnail image for this video, and I'll explain why. So, first and foremost, though, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. And if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to stop by. I usually am on camera. I wasn't on camera actually last forecast I did for different reasons, but today is quick and dirty, and that's because I actually recorded this forecast yesterday, and the program I used called Riverside is an online video editing program, which is really great. I do enjoy using it quite a bit, but because there were outages pretty much all over the internet yesterday, this also suffered, and even though it recorded, it, as of this morning, had still only processed like 97% of the video. That allows me then to download it and then to re-upload it to the various video platforms to post it on my social media. And I decided, you know what, this is a pretty clear indication, to me at least, that this forecast needs to be re-recorded. So the lack of imagery of my face, right, not being on camera, is really a function of the fact that I didn't have, this was not budgeted into the time for today. So for any of you who run your own businesses, you have multiple streams of income, you are also having to focus on your domestic responsibilities on top of working, on top of projects, on top of everything, right? Time management is key, and sometimes there just isn't really time to go back over and do something. And anybody who makes any type of content knows that there is a tremendous amount of work that goes into everything around that. And yeah, it would probably be easy to just flip on the camera and be here in my completely unmanaged physical visual self, but I didn't want to deal with the lighting, the ring light, getting prepared to be on camera, because I just don't have time. That's just the reality of it. This was budgeted to be done yesterday, and it was, and circumstances outside of my control have rendered that pretty much useless. So here we are again. It's important to stay consistent as much as possible, even when we don't have control over the circumstances around us. And that's I think, just a really good teachable moment, regardless of what you're working with. So we're going to launch right into this new moon forecast. I'm going to burn some Palo Santo. That's kind of the clicking you may hear in the background, is just me and the lighter lighting this Palo Santo. So we're going to go over the astrological themes of the next 2 weeks. We have, like I said, a Libra new moon at the very last degrees of the sign of Libra, just to remind ourselves what we're working with here. This is tropical or Western astrology. There are various types of astrologies and astrological formats, the ways that we look at things, how we're measuring them, what the actual template is, and we are looking at tropical and Western astrology. It is different than Vedic or sidereal astrology, and it's not something I'm necessarily going to go into right this moment. I've talked about it plenty of times in other videos, and I'm sure I'll talk about it again when I have the time to be more long-winded and verbose about these things. But we are looking at tropical or Western astrology. And if I had to pick a phrase to encompass the energy of this new moon period, and really this whole lunar cycle. So these forecasts, we look at in this case, the new moon up to the full moon, right? The first half of the lunar cycle. When we get to the full moon forecast, we will look at the full moon finishing out the lunar cycle. But the new moon is a time where there are new seeds of intention that we can imbue with our focus and our energy in order to be part of consciously our own development, our own creation, right? To be a conscious co-creator, not to minimize minimize some of these, some of these flash phrases at this point. But that's really what we're working with the new moon. So the first half of the lunar cycle is usually much more spontaneous. We're reacting and responding to things as they start to develop, as they start to come out of the darkness, much like a seed as it is starting to prepare for germination and pushing its way up through the soil and into the light. And then when we get to the full moon, we have a much more illuminated awareness of our purpose. It is clarified, it is fulfilled, and then our job as conscious beings is that we take that fulfillment and clarification, and we are responsible for consciously continuing to act on it, to put it into action as the light of the moon, which is really reflecting the light of the sun, starts to wane. So we have our new moon today as of Eastern Standard Time, roughly, before noon here, and we're going to start a new cycle. So our last lunar cycle was started with a partial solar eclipse, and in some ways it feels like a lifetime ago, and in other ways it feels like it's been the blink of an eye. And this concept of binding time is something that is very much wrapped up into the imagery and the symbolism of this lunar cycle. And part of that, or maybe even the entirety of that, has to do, I think, with the conscious participation of the process of being present in the now moment. And so you look at this bridge that spans two sides of an embankment, right? You have a stream going down and the bridge is spanning the gap, so to speak. So if you want to think about it in terms of where we've been and where we're going, there does need to be a conscious participation in this process, that where we've been, we can't necessarily change those events, and really all we have is the now moment, which is our conscious participation. And so it's very easy to get caught up in fear of our own, failures, fear of things that might not work out if we take a risk, all of the past woundings. We're going to talk a lot about Chiron in this forecast because it's very involved and will continue to be very involved, and has been actually. So there is a lot of internalized fear and wounding that is continuing to provide resistance, that is providing friction, that is holding us back from crossing this threshold, so to speak. But really, now that Venus is in Libra and has been, and she's really moving into the heart of the sign now. So Venus is a planet and a planetary body. She rules the sign of Libra. She also rules the sign of Taurus. But in Libra, she is much more akin to the symbol of Lady Justice, right? The idea that justice is blind. You have this woman who has the blindfold, but she's holding the scales. And Venus, to me, as an astrologer and somebody who reads for other people, and as somebody who works professionally in the healing arts, very physically with people, Venus represents our energetic compass, right? Our intuition, our gut check, right? It's about what is truly valuable and meaningful to us. Yes, she rules love and relationships and money because those things are valuable to us as incarnated physical beings. We're spiritual beings having this human experience, and Venus is the mediator of all of those experiences. And with the fact that she represents justice as being blind, represents, at least to me, I don't know anybody else who really considers it this way in terms of astrology. It's just the thing that makes the most sense to me, that we can be deceived by what we see, but what we can't be deceived by is what we feel. And there are many times where all of us have ignored our gut check, where we've ignored our feels, not our emotions, but our physical feels, our energetic feels, our intuition, right? We passed it off as imagination or paranoia, or, that it's just in our heads, right? And yeah, it is. Everything's in our heads. But the body never lies, right? And it always keeps score. And justice being blind and Venus being the representation of Lady Justice in the sign of Libra is that, yes, we can be deceived by what we see, but she is holding those scales and she can feel truly what is balanced and what is out of balance. And as she's coming now into the heart of the sign of Libra, her home territory, we're really getting to a point where we can no longer bullshit ourselves, okay? I mean, when the sun was, finishing in Libra, which is what's happening right now, Mercury in Libra, even Mars in Libra, which was at its weakest, right? Because Mars is at home in its opposite sign of Aries. All of these ways that we could have basically bullshitted ourselves in terms of what's balance. Oh, I can think my way into balance. Oh, I can act my way into balance. Oh, I can just express myself in a balanced way, which is the sun in Libra. Venus here, there is no bullshitting ourselves anymore. And the transits, just in the next couple of days in particular, are going to really highlight the need for some serious adjustment with what we are coming to realize are illusionary positions, right? So if you have been attempting to bypass your way, think your way, act your way, express your way into some sort of balanced position, you might find, and there's nothing wrong with those things. What I'm saying is that if there has not been an honesty with ourselves, or we've been trying to force that square peg into the round hole type of thing, or we've been ignoring what our true desires are, which has been the energy of the last full moon that we had, which is along the Aries-Libra axis, because Aries is about our desire and the potency of our desire to create, to bring ourselves into full expression as a spiritual being. And it does come from this innate desire, this impulse to be. And there's been diligence. There's been a sense of almost repetition. Sometimes that can feel boring. Sometimes you think it's not going anywhere. But the reality is that we're weaving something that we can wrap around us as our desires and our fulfillment, right? Whatever it is, whether it's career-wise, whether it's relationship-wise, whether it's spiritually, whether it's healing, whatever it is for you, we've been on this path. And certainly because the last lunar cycle started with a solar eclipse at the very last degrees of Virgo. I mean, this is a cycle that's going to take us into February in terms of blocking out the distraction, closing out the background noise, and staying focused on what it is that we are attempting to master for ourselves. Again, regardless of what it is. Now that Venus is fully in Libra, I think that anywhere that we've been bullshitting ourselves, it is now becoming beyond obvious if we are not getting completely lost in the illusion that something is out of balance, okay? So we have to consciously participate in the process of creating that balance, whether that's walking across this bridge, learning from our past, but also staying oriented towards where we're going. And those things are only a function of what we're doing in this now moment. And so we have to, basically exist in two places at once, which can be very difficult. And Chiron right now, the asteroid, comet, whatever Chiron, it kind of has this weird orbit between Saturn and Uranus. It is in a degree right now in Aries that is promising that we can get to where we're going if only we have this undaunted faith in ourselves. So there are a couple big things that are happening throughout this whole lunar cycle that I want to draw attention to before we get into the chart and start looking at the play-by-play over the next 2 weeks, okay? So Neptune, as of tomorrow, is going to retrograde back into its home sign of Pisces, right? So this is, we've had a little bit of a taste here with Neptune and Aries about a revival of ourselves spiritually and a sense of independence, a sense of courage and boldness in terms of our connection to source. And it does feel like that Saturn and Neptune, when they come into that exact conjunction, in February at 0 degrees Aries. I mean, it's really going to crystallize this spiritual revival, this awakening process, right? So we've got a little bit of a taste of it, but these two planets are in their retrogrades, meaning that we are having much more of an internalized experience of them, but also in Pisces, back into Pisces. And Neptune being the ruling planet of Pisces, we're about to come back in, and everything is just going to kind of like dissolve back into formlessness. The thing about the retrograde of Neptune, in my opinion, and the way that I read, is that it is a lot clearer than it usually is, right? It's not all smoke and mirrors at this point. Things have the house lights have come up. You can see that it's a set. You can tell that it's all a show, right? You may still be out at sea, but all the fog has cleared away and you have a much clearer view of your place within the whole, and how what it is that we want to be aligned with is really a function of what we resonate with. And this opportunity of Neptune coming back into Pisces in its retrograde is there's going to be lots of options over the next couple of days, where there'll be lots of options to adjust ourselves, right? About where we've been and where we want to go, and how we can't change our past, but what we can do is change our resonance and our perspective in relation to that past. And this is a lot of great opportunity, but it's also very difficult. So we're going to go into the specifics of all these transits. So Neptune is going back into Pisces. The other things that's going to happen is Uranus is in retrograde. It's sitting on Alcyon, the main star in the Pleiadian star cluster. And then Uranus is also going to retrograde back into Taurus. So these two large transpersonal planets that have more to do with not personal issues, more collective issues around, rebellion and freedom and, turning things on their head, which is Uranus. And then Neptune is that broad spectrum, humanitarian, idealistic, spiritual experience, right? Where we're all one and we're all dissolved into the oneness of spirit. Neptune represents that too. They're both retrograde and they're both going back into feminine signs, water and earth. They're both right now, as of this recording, still in their masculine fire and air signs. They're moving back into water and earth. And so as we are moving along our pathway, things are going to get a lot more murky. They're going to get a lot more feeling oriented. They're going to get a lot more in the yin, if that makes sense. And that's not very action oriented, although that doesn't mean that we are complacent. It means that we are going to really have to sit in what has been and really be able to recalibrate or reorient ourselves, I guess you could say, towards where we're going, not by action, but by changing our resonance, right? And that could be changing our perspective. That could be changing something very physical about what we're doing, right? What is our dietary habits? What are our practices, spiritually, whatever it is, there's something that we're going to have to, we're going to reorganize in some way, but it's not going to be as action oriented as maybe we are used to in terms of making change or fulfilling those desires, right? So, and that takes time out of the equation, in a way that we're probably, most of us are not used to, or we're starting to get used to. That time is very malleable, right? And it's really about our resonance and our perspective that has an impact on the experience we have in any given moment. So, those two planets. The other things that are happening this month in this lunar cycle is that both Mercury and Jupiter are going to also retrograde in water signs. So Jupiter's in Cancer, very happy in Cancer, very powerful in Cancer. It's an endless expansion into our own power base. That's going to retrograde. And Mercury is still in Scorpio and is going to move into Sagittarius, and then it's going to retrograde back into Scorpio. So those two, before that happens, and we'll certainly look at this in the astrology of the next 2 weeks, they're going to come into a very favorable connection, very balanced, foundational connection called a trine. They're going to come into a trine this coming Friday. This is a great opportunity to really kind of put some plans into place, like, be and gather in some good information. It's very auspicious, and especially in terms of our feelings, our spiritual nature, where our power comes from, because that's very much Cancer is our personal power. Scorpio is about our collective or communal power. Those two are going to retrograde as well. So even there's going to be a lot of retrospective about power dynamics, where they come from, where our shared resources are coming from and going to, and where our personal power really resides. So just know as well, there's going to be a period with that retrograde that's going to be much more internalized, especially when it comes to our thought process. And Mercury in Scorpio is really digging for the truth, and Jupiter in Cancer about really going into the deeper aspects of our own power base, and maybe expanding deeper within, as opposed to really spreading that root system out, in terms of home and family and our domestic life, and again, where our power comes from, because that's really what Cancer represents, at least when you look at astrology from a symbolic and shamanic and archetypal position. So those things are going to be retrograde. Like I said, Uranus and Neptune are retrograding back into water and earth signs. Uranus especially is still in the territory of the Pleiades. This is going to come up big time, I think, especially as we come into Scorpio season. Mercury and Mars were conjunct at 20 degrees Scorpio yesterday. You may have felt a really strong turbocharge of really fierce and piercing intellectual energy, right? And I'll go into specifics about that too, just to maybe give you some context about how maybe you have been feeling about where things are heading, and really gathering the courage to plunge ahead into the unknown, because that's the other thing, is like, you've always been maybe on this side of the bridge, right? And you don't know what's on the other side of the bridge, but you know that you have to walk across it. We all know that in order to get where we want to go, to fulfill that fulfillment of our desires, in order to reach this state of spiritual revival, then we have to cross over, and we have to consciously do it. We can't just wait for it to happen, or, go back and stay where we're comfortable, even though we don't actually want to be there anymore, but we don't know how to pull ourselves out of our own wounding. And this is all these really, big Chiron themes that are involved in all of this. So without further ado, my friends, let's get into the chart itself. So I'm gonna share a different screen with you right now. And let's just really hope here that that we are getting, this is actually recording. So far so good, right? I haven't gotten any messages from Riverside that anything is wrong, or that there's any issue with their platform or any of their stuff. So I think we're good to go here. So this is the chart for the new moon, roughly. So, and we're going to talk about the new moon today, and go into the specifics of the Sabian symbol, talk a little bit about Arcturus, because that's a big energy that's related to all of this as well. And remember that Libra represents, the scales of balance, meaning that there are two sides to a situation. And that is the seventh house in astrology. When you step into relationship, regardless of what relationship it is, personal, domestic, business, spiritual, societal, right? When we talk about the scales of justice, I mean, this is about a social contract. Being in a society means that we all follow the rules of that society in order to function appropriately, and to our communion together, which is Scorpio energy, to generate resources and wealth that actually perpetuate civilization in a positive and sustainable way. The Arcturian energy is very masterful in terms of how things are, in the knowledge base of how things are constructed in order to maximize the potential of any space. And I'll go into that a little bit soon. I want to just draw a little bit of attention first on that Mars conjunct Mercury transit that was yesterday. So you can see that they're still pretty much conjunct. Mercury, as of today, has started to move past Mars in Scorpio. Mercury as a symbolic representation of the deity Hermes, for instance. If you think about the myth around Hermes and the underworld, he was really the only deity that could go into the underworld and leave. They couldn't really do that. So he was often known as a shepherd of souls as well. So if souls were lost and couldn't get to Hades or the underworld, he would shepherd souls into. A little different than the ferryman, the river Styx, but I think kind of the same basic archetype. So Mercury, this idea that our mind is able to traverse our own underworld, our own darkness, and not get lost in there is something really important to consider, because Mercury retrograding back into Scorpio could be very difficult, and to keep that in mind as you go even deeper into your own shadow. How have you participated, and not just you as this viewer here, but myself is always included in these readings. How, I guess I should say, how have we participated in, the power dynamics of a certain relationship, and the review of that, really looking ourselves in the mirror and doing an honest review of that is going to be Mercury in Scorpio. And not just ourselves, but, the entirety of the, social system and the energy and power that is generated through that. Mars is at home in Scorpio. This is a ruling body of Scorpio. And so there's courage and there's determination and there is boldness and action, and a willingness to go further and deeper. There's a hunger with Scorpio, Mars and Scorpio. So these two coming together into a conjunction yesterday at 20 degrees Scorpio gives a lot of mental sharpness, decisiveness, enthusiasm. When you have a focused mind and a piercing intellect, you can argue your case and defend against anything, really. So the other side to this is that there can be a very aggressive or defensive nature. So you may have found yourself kind of getting into this space. Maybe you were losing your temper, getting into arguments, and being kind of unnecessarily rude to people. But there may, and in some cases this might be necessary, not to necessarily be rude, but to be on be on a more provocative side of things in order to defend yourself if you're like being called to the carpet about something, right? So the key to handling this energy, which is still very present, by the way, just because it was an exact conjunction yesterday doesn't mean that it's not still hanging around. I definitely felt it when I woke up this morning, especially because I was just really annoyed that this didn't get recorded yesterday. So the key to handling this it's very provocative energy, especially in Scorpio, is to have self-awareness and finding a healthy outlet, right? Even if it's something as simple as doing a puzzle, right? Now, 20 degrees Scorpio is, the Sabian symbol is a woman that just like draws these two curtains that have been closing a sacred pathway. She draws them open. And the idea here is that we're consciously making a choice to move beyond duality, and in a very feeling-based way. Libra is cardinal air. It is projecting our mind into a situation and our intellect in order to establish and be able to not just establish balance, but be able to even sense balance, to be able to see, is this symmetrical? Is it equitable? Is it fair? Is it balanced? Scorpio is way in the feels about it and is a different experience entirely. And so there's a plunging ahead into the unknown with 20 degrees Scorpio that, yesterday and even right now, we might still be feeling that decisiveness and enthusiasm and maybe a buildup of nervous energy around whatever it is that we're deciding to plunge into, right? this transit gives a tendency toward acting before thinking. And that's another piece. Just because we're taking the steps across the bridge, bridging the gap, does not mean that there is nothing to be learned about where we've been and that there won't be challenges. And that is something that is going to be popping up in our face all this week, with a variety of different transits. So let's start looking at them. First, we're going to talk about the new moon, which is today, and the Sabian symbol, humanity seeking to bridge the span of knowledge, right? Again, cardinal energy has a momentum behind it. So the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, it is all of the elements with this momentum behind it. So Libra has momentum behind, the transmission of knowledge, teaching, instructing, putting into practice rule of law, for instance, right? This degree, 28 to 29 degrees Libra, represents this deep sense of participation and a commitment to social processes. Again, because this is not about the individual necessarily. This is about us within that relationship and the nature of that relationship. And it rests upon a very deep feeling of the value of community. So we also have to keep this in mind as well. We had the full moon in Aries, which that full moon represented the dichotomy or the axis of the Libra Aries energy. And now we have a new moon in Libra. So we had this sense of what we individually desired and what we are manifesting. And now it's about being able to apply that to the community and to bring the community to a sense of greatness or a greater life. And so also to join others, right? It's not just about us individually, it's about taking that individual desire and potency and to join others in the process of a living civilization, right? There's nothing static here about civilization. It is always dynamic. It is made up of individuals maximizing their potential. And so this is where the new moon is situated, right? This is the seed of intention that we can be working on throughout this whole month that really boils down to conscious participation, right? And we can't just be, sitting in the background, as much as we want to kind of sit in the background and really, let things happen to us, right? Or maybe we don't want to make, take calculated risks because we're comfortable where we are, but maybe where we've been is actually reinforcing that old wound, and there's that Chiron energy again. So this is the new moon energy, and we come right into tomorrow, which is Wednesday the 22nd, and we're going to start right away getting all these quincunxes with the Scorpio sun to Neptune and to Uranus. Both are sitting at 0 to 1 degree of their signs. And so right away, and so let me first bring up, I want to bring up the actual chart for that day so you can visually see it if in fact you are looking at the chart, but also to, just so I have a frame of reference too to look at the chart. So here we are on the 22nd of October, and right away the sun is, it's about to come into Scorpio, and like I said, it's going to quincunx both Neptune and Uranus. And in fact, it's going to create something called a yod, or a finger of God, or a finger of destiny. And that's when you have two bodies that are in a sextile or a 60-degree angle, which is normally harmonious but transformational energy, but they're both in this inconjunct with one point, and that is the finger, right? It's pointing to that. And an inconjunct is basically or quincunx is where you're trying to, force the square peg into the round hole. There is no resolving these two things. They will never fit together, right? And so it forces an adjustment within ourselves to deal with the tension of the quincunx. And so it's really pointing to, in this situation, the sun at 0 degrees Scorpio in terms of the yod, right? Then 0 degrees Scorpio is, number one, 0 degrees in any of the signs in galactic astrology is going to be the crack between worlds. And it's the essence of that sign distilled down to its basic energy. And 0 degrees Scorpio, Sabian symbol, is a crowded sightseeing bus on a busy city street. And the idea here is that people from all different walks of life, different cultures, different places, coming together into one vehicle and going to see the sights of a place they've never been, right? So you're widening your experience and consciously and intentionally doing so. I like to call this degree the tour bus to hell, because that's the thing, is like it's not all sunshine and rainbows in Scorpio, as any Scorpio person will tell you, that you are getting into the dredges of any situation when you're going into Scorpio, because that's at the that's at the root of things, is the abyss, right? So that tells you right there that finding a way to be sustained and to be sustained and to find fulfillment, because that's what the sun represents, and expression in this basic scorpionic energy is really going to be where we want to, where it's pointing, where the yod is pointing. So, but in the meantime, let's talk about these inconjuncts with the sun and Uranus and Neptune, both retrograde. So they're still in Aries and Gemini as of these two quincunxes. So some basic things here about these inconjuncts with the sun and Neptune and Uranus is, it's the sun at the last degree of Libra, for instance, making a quincunx to Neptune. That is actually, I am wrong about that. It has now moved back into Pisces. So focusing on relationships and balance, and then you have Neptune in retrograde, which in Pisces, which is bringing a confrontation with illusions and dissolving of old ideals. So the quincunx is going to create that need to adjust yourself between these energies. So you're going to we're all going to be forced to align our social life or relationships with a harsh new reality, right? And maybe it's not entirely new because we are retrograding back into old territory, but other things have happened that have brought this reality up to the surface. So we're going to find ourselves in a position where we may need to reevaluate our partnerships and shed idealistic views for something that's way more authentic, right? And maybe we've been, living in this illusion because it's been easier, or we've been holding out for something, and now we're just coming to this sense of like, no, this is actually, it is never going to pan out the way that I have been hoping or idealizing it, right? And there's nothing wrong with being idealistic, but isn't it better to be authentic and real and be present with what is, rather than living in the illusion? And that's always a pitfall with Neptune, especially coming back into Pisces. So illusion versus reality. On top of that, the quincunx to Uranus is signifying a very karmic imbalance. So here we go again, right? So it triggers a reevaluation of deeply held beliefs, a need for change, right? The sun in Scorpio, and then it comes into Scorpio and clashes with Uranus, and it creates a tension that forces us to adapt our fixed values, because that's Scorpio, right? What are the fixed signs? Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. Sorry, I'm just having a moment there. Those are fixed energies, so they're not mutable. They're not moving around very much. They're very, very staunchly themselves. So you have the sun in Scorpio, a fixed sign that's meeting Uranus in Gemini, which is very mutable, and Uranus is always changing stuff. So the tension will force us to adapt our fixed values around communion, right? The sun in Scorpio, and perceptions to new and possibly disruptive information, especially at 0 degrees Gemini, right? I mean, the thing about 0 degrees Gemini is that it's a glass bottom boat. You see the whole thing. Even though you have your own consciousness that is the glass at the bottom of the boat, you still see it all. And so expect feelings of restlessness where you're pushed to connect with new ideas. But if you're struggling with all of this, remember the yod pointing to the sun at the last degree of Libra into the first degree of Scorpio, which is that we're all in this together. And for better or for worse, is not just a catchy phrase for getting married. It really is about going from Libra to Scorpio, because it's one thing to sign that marriage contract. It's another to go into the depths of what it means to be in partnership. And I think that if we can, really find that place, then we can help. It's not going to necessarily take away those feelings of restlessness, but give us a sense that we are moving into new territory, and it's okay to reevaluate and to embrace this need for change. There's nothing wrong with it. Now, on top of all of those things is the fact that Jupiter in Cancer is now in a direct square to Chiron. So this is actually a great segue into those woundedness, the woundedness of Chiron in Aries, because this has been really, especially this degree, it's really been testing us, I think, in terms of our ability to really stay present and to acknowledge that, maybe we failed. Maybe we lost faith in a situation before, but what it is that we are, our desires that we are wanting to fulfill, whatever they are, they can still be fulfilled, right? And that sometimes we fail because that is actually how we learn. And so if you think of a standard guru disciple relationship, sometimes the guru would set you up to fail specifically so that you would learn A, from that failure, and B, how to pick yourself back up and get back on the horse, right? So this Chiron in retrograde here, for all of us, I think, is really pushing that button. And then to have Jupiter involved in Cancer, which at this point in late stage of Cancer, I mean, we're feeling very powerful, very willful about things. And so there's a period of emotional and spiritual tension. So, I mean, this is all in one day, which is tomorrow. So just be aware that this energy is already growing. This square is going to force a confrontation between personal growth and old emotional wounds related to courage, identity, self-worth, especially concerning taking action, right? Oh boy, there is so many paradoxes in the astrology right now that is mind-blowing, right? We want to take action, but we want to surrender to what is, right? I was just working with somebody over the weekend, doing actual in-person energy work. Gosh, I haven't done a full session of energy work in person in a while, and it was so great. And we were just talking about how, the spiritual journey is such a mindfuck. It's a total paradox every step of the way. So, and this type of transit is no exception. And so the tension can manifest this feeling of being held back by past hurts and leading to internal conflict, right? We want to expand. Jupiter in Cancer, and we're very willful, but we're afraid to assert ourselves, right? We're afraid of what we're going to lose, right? We're afraid of what we're going to have to surrender, and these are all normal feelings that everybody has. They're going to be amplified so much in the next day, and they're already building. So, this can be a very powerful time to face those emotional blocks. I really encourage all of us to have the courage to do so. And again, Mars and Mercury in their conjunction with Scorpio, along with Black Moon Lilith, if you are looking at the chart, I mean, there is an incredible amount of power that we can harness for this process. And healing does involve acknowledging the fear without letting it paralyze you. You can't just bypass it, or pretend that it doesn't exist. All right. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging fear. It's about, not letting it swallow you whole, right? Allowing you to integrate the wisdom gained from your past experiences in your present. So, wow, tomorrow's going to be fun, Thursday, I should say. Friday is where things, so the next couple of days is just a lot of doubt and pushing on those wounds, and I'm scared and I'm afraid I can't, I won't be able to succeed and what I'm letting go and blah, 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 blah. Take a breath. And as we move into Friday, we're going to get a surge of energy. So first and foremost, the sun in Scorpio is going to square Pluto, the other ruling body of Scorpio, okay? And this gives us a lot of strength and motivation to work hard, to struggle through those difficulties. Yes, there is going to be some nostalgic feeling of what is being left behind with the sun in Scorpio. That's the thing about, letting, sacrificing something in order to gain something more, right? That there is a memory, a nostalgia of what we're giving up. And there's nothing wrong with considering that, okay? But the square to Pluto, which is definitely the demolition machine turning back on at a civilization level, right? We're talking about Aquarius, and our higher selves. These types of things are the exact events that allow us to develop resiliency. So the sun in a square to Pluto is one of those types of transits where you actually get more energy, more motivation, more strength to work hard and struggle through the difficulties. Now, there is a tendency to be controlling and to get into power struggles. So watch yourself on that. You may be forced into a corner in a situation where you have to defend yourself or change significantly. So be prepared for that as well. You don't want to get caught up in the power struggle, but you also don't want to just get pushed back into the corner and just roll over either. And a sun square Pluto doesn't really set you up for that. But you could find yourself being on the other side of manipulation, intimidation, some very intense or ruthless behavior. You could be the one executing that behavior and become very destructive and dangerous if you don't know when to stop. So, this is a very intense type of transit. So use it to your advantage, okay? And it's a great time to eliminate bad habits, destructive tendencies, especially with increased awareness, okay? And by sacrificing your need to be in control, you can evolve, right? And you letting go, sublimate the ego, which is very difficult when you're talking about the sun, because that is our ego in full expression. But in Scorpio, the sun in Scorpio has an expression in sacrifice, and not like unnecessary sacrifice or martyrdom or anything like that. More of just like a knowing that we gain more together than we each individually could generate ourselves, right? So there's a huge, oddly enough, catalyst for transforming your self-worth and in this moment. And the other thing about this is, then I talked about it earlier, which is that Mercury is going to trine Jupiter. Now, both of these, like I said, are going to come into their retrogrades throughout the next 4 weeks. But before that happens, we have this trine, and it brings optimism and good news, right? This is a really ideal time to clean up and organize your life. So maybe planning on a journey, embarking on a journey, especially if it's long distance, you're talking about Jupiter, but you're talking about Cancer and Scorpio. So this has more to do with the spiritual journey, the journey of power, and where that power really resides and how it can be offered into something more. So something like business dealings should go really well. This is a great time to kind of start talking about stuff, going into negotiations, really maybe even signing a contract possibly. Very fortunate with Mercury trine Jupiter like this, right? Very good news, very optimistic. And so you have this motivation and determination with the sun squaring Jupiter, and then you have this Mercury trine Jupiter, Mercury trine Jupiter, sun square Pluto, I'm sorry. And then you have this trine that's really favorable for getting it done, at least talking about it, at least feeling confident about it, making some long range plans, for instance, right? And even right after that, Mercury is going to trine Saturn, and it's going to trine Neptune over, the days following that. And again, Mercury in a trine to Saturn, talk about some really responsible and determined thinking, right? A serious frame of mind, common sense, an eye toward practical results, attending to things that really need your attention, that are things like insurance and estate planning and, family matters, but it also allows for precise emotional thinking that is needed to address past patterns or fears resurfacing due to the Saturn retrograde. That's the other thing. Saturn retrograde in Pisces, have things come to fruition, what has come, what has consummated at this time, and do I even want to be responsible for those things? Encourage you to find a balance between your intuition and your need for structure. That's a big part of the Saturn energy, especially retrograde, your internal structure. So I want to talk because I'm kind of running out of time here as well, as I talked about. And one thing I will say as a not so shameless plug for Catalyst membership is that on the off weeks, I do an energy reading for the membership that's posted directly to the membership site. It's a video, it's a card reading, it's happening on the off weeks. And so that's a really good supplement energetically to what's going on. It's a much smaller container. It's a pure energetic read with the cards. And so it really helps kind of round out some of this stuff that I can't get to, or certainly gives more texture to the pure astrological reads that are really generalized here. So there'll be more information that's coming this weekend. And so, coming off of Friday, Saturday into next week, there's going to be more information and certainly more of a reading to kind of help round some things out, because we're going to get into our first quarter moon soon after. And of course, Mars is going to do the same thing that Mercury did, which is trine Saturn and trine Neptune. So again, getting that courage and that ambition and a sense of real spiritual commitment with Mars and Neptune, for instance. And then, Mars, and it's going to trine Jupiter too. Like, talk about like desire to compete to win, right? There's a lot of really good energy coming next week that's really going to support us in whatever it is that we are working to build, whatever, wherever we're moving towards, whatever we are manifesting, whatever desire we're wanting to fulfill. There's going to be a lot of good energy coming into next week to really support that. But there are a couple pitfalls here. One is Mercury and Uranus will be opposite each other. That's going to be a little bit difficult, and we'll talk about that. But also, too, like I said, the first quarter moon is on the 29th, and that's going to be with the moon in Aquarius. Let me bring it up here. The moon will be in Aquarius and it'll square the Scorpio sun. So that's a fixed square. And so this is the first quarter moon is a crisis point, a crisis in action. What do I do? Now, there's no resolving this. You're not like picking one side or the other. You are leaning into the friction that's created, how you feel on the inside, which is the moon, and how you express yourself on the outside, which is the sun and Scorpio. Which at that, 6 to 7 degrees Scorpio is deep sea divers, right? You're really getting into the underlying structures of whatever relationships you are participating in, right? But the moon in Aquarius, 6 to 7 degrees is the cosmic egg, right? So I think we're all going to start feeling, the new version of ourselves and society that we're part of. The upgraded version, I think, starting to feel it, the potential of it, the fact that it is coming forward. But that doesn't mean that we still aren't engaged in the power dynamics of what we're currently involved in. Because if we want that cosmic egg to bring forward like this new upgraded version of ourselves and society and civilization, we still have to be fully engaged in the power dynamics right now of where we are, which means we have to go deeper. So there'll definitely be some friction around that, even though we have all these really, these grand water trines basically with Mercury, with Mars, with Neptune and Saturn and Jupiter, right? I mean, it's very stabilizing emotionally and spiritually. But at the same time, there are going to be challenges that present themselves. So the Mercury opposite Uranus, I think, is definitely worth looking at as Mercury comes into Sag, because Mercury is at its detriment in Sagittarius, absolutely, and is at its weakest in Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is about the alchemy of polarity, right? You're bringing two things together and creating something new, which is understanding, which is the big picture, which is wisdom. And Mercury just wants to play in the realm of ideas, never really settling on anything or even alchemizing them at all. So Mercury's already going to be in a little bit of a disadvantage. And then being opposite Uranus in its sign that it wants to be in, which is Gemini, there's going to be a lot of speeding up of the mind, right? It's a hectic pace. There's going to be lots, feelings of tension and very scattered, right? Now, there's always the possibility of something unexpected happening that increases your anxiety. So please be aware of that. And if you have overlooked anything or rushed into something against my better judgment and advice that I'm giving right now, this is the type of transit where it'll come back at you, right? Because it'll be like, hey, you didn't look at the big picture when you had the opportunity, and now you are trying to perpetuate a situation that, you missed something, you overlooked something, right? So this is not a great time to make plans or negotiate. That was the week before, right? This is going to throw a monkey wrench in the works here. So it's a great time to let go of responsibility, not entirely, but just go with the flow, see what comes up. You can make discoveries, flashes of insight, meet new or exciting people, or challenge your thinking, right? This ultimately can be a situation that if you're comfortable with being able to let go of controlling every facet of reality around you, then these types of things can be like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen. That's a whole new twist that I didn't anticipate, right? So keep an open mind. Your plans may change, right? Double check all the details if you're planning to do something at this time. And, there can be lots of different malfunctions. So ultimately, you're to expect some mental restlessness coming into Samhain and a need to reconcile large ideas with practical realities, right? So the idea, and remember that Mercury is going to retrograde back to this point. So it's not going to be the last time you're dealing with whatever it is that Mercury is sitting with, right? The, big idea. It's going to be the first time that we're going to have this opposition with Uranus. So just be ready for that. There'll be plenty of opportunities where you might feel like your beliefs are being shattered by new information. So just be aware of it, right? And then we come into Samhain. And, I think I'm really going to leave it here because then our full moon is going to be on the 5th. Remember the 5th of November. The full moon in in Taurus. The full moon will be in Taurus because the sun is in Scorpio. And ultimately, when we get to this full moon, we're going to have I think it'll become very clear at this point, and it's going to be different for everyone, that we want to establish new connections. We are establishing new lines of communication within the power structures, within the relationships, within the resources that we share with whoever we're in relationship with, right? Whatever those Libra relationships are, Scorpio is the power that's generated in them, right? And so we want to establish new connections, maybe widen our connections, maybe deepen them, whatever it is. The full moon in Taurus will highlight and illuminate the natural emergence of that which we want to bring forward in terms of resources, in terms of materiality, right? All the nuts and bolts of life. And for those of you who are part of the Catalyst membership, you'll remember the last reading that we just did was very nuts and bolts heavy, wasn't it? It was very physical. It was very material. It was very much about what we are bringing into form and how to best do it. And ultimately that, we are in a position to experience fulfillment at that level. This is really bringing us to the reality check that things will naturally emerge from a place of energetically and spiritually creating and establishing new connections, deeper connections of communication, for instance. So, all right, friends, I have to leave it there for the time being. And I think I covered everything pretty well. So not really quick. This is the usual amount of time that I would spend on a forecast like this. And not necessarily dirty either. I feel like that I got through a lot of what I got through yesterday. So just a little bit amended, that's all. Maybe some things got left out, some new things come channeling through. either way, I'm going to leave it here for today. So my friends, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. Everything you need is in the description box below. If you're on video platforms, of course, if you're watching this ad-free on Facebook or Telegram on my channels, then you can certainly find anything that you need to get a hold of me in those places. Most importantly, the website, catalystenergies.net. Everything you need is also there in terms of booking a service, so either a reading or energy work, or you can get information on how to join Catalyst membership, and everything that goes along with that, which is energy readings twice a month. If you're a premium member, you get your own personal reading every 4 to 6 weeks from me, and then you get a dedicated discount code depending on what tier you're subscribed to that gives you a discount on everything in my store except the Starseed package, because that's already discounted. So guys, enjoy the new moon. Try to enjoy the paradox as best you can, knowing that it's really about being present in the moment and consciously participating in the process of binding time, which is really just changing your resonance about what has happened in order to manifest the future that you want to be part of. I love you guys. Thank you for being here. I'll talk to you next time.